The stars stretched endlessly across the dark sea of space, cold and silent, broken only by the faint pulse of engines that hummed through the void. 200 ships, massive, gleaming vessels of the Galactic Alliance, moved together like a school of metal beasts, their hulls reflecting the distant suns. The fleet was powerful, proud, and unchallenged. It had been centuries since anyone dared to oppose them. The admiral of the lead ship, a broad-scaled Dravian named Cortal, stood before the viewing screen, his long claws clicking against the railing in quiet rhythm. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "No one drifts off course. The Terran system is ahead." The bridge crew nodded, their movements confident, casual. For years, the story of Earth had been nothing but a ghost tale, a civilization that burned too brightly and vanished into its own fire. The fleet's mission was simple: secure what remained of a forgotten colony world, strip it of technology, and return. Nothing more, nothing less. But in the back of every mind there lingered the same thought. If the humans were truly gone, why had the Council ordered an entire fleet? The void ahead of them shimmered faintly, and the scanners hummed with low static. The crew didn't notice at first. Space often played tricks on sensors. But then the static turned into a sharp pulse, steady, rhythmic, deliberate. "Contact?" asked the communications officer, her voice uncertain. "No transmissions, sir. It's not artificial. Or maybe it is." The admiral frowned. "Visual." The holographic display flickered, showing a distant shape, small, fast, moving in a straight line toward them. It wasn't broadcasting an identity code. It wasn't emitting heat. It wasn't even visible to radar until it was practically on top of them. "Probably debris," muttered one officer. "Or some scavenger ship." The admiral grunted in agreement. "Lock target, scan for weapons." But the computer returned only static. "System error," said the officer, confusion creeping into his voice. "Reboot sensors." The static grew louder. The stars outside began to dim. Then the lights on the bridge flickered once, just once, and every screen went black. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The hum of the ship's reactor vanished. The sound of power, so constant it had become part of their breath, was simply gone. "Report!" barked the admiral. No response. "Engineering?" Silence. He turned toward the viewport and froze. The stars were gone. Every light in the galaxy had vanished, leaving only blackness pressing against the glass. "Emergency lights!" someone shouted, but even those refused to respond. The bridge was a coffin now, lit only by the pale glow of their own fear. "Admiral," whispered the sensor officer, voice trembling. "Something's out there." The blackness shifted, subtle at first, like a shadow moving against itself. Then, from the depths of the void, something enormous drifted into view. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't moving fast. It simply was. A shape older than memory, edges sharp as broken glass, hull covered in black plating that seemed to swallow light itself. No markings, no visible weapons, only a faint circular emblem etched into its side. The translator flickered, trying to interpret the symbol. When the letters appeared, the bridge fell silent. TSS Vengeance. The name meant nothing to most of the crew, but to the historians aboard it was impossible. The Vengeance had been destroyed over 1,000 years ago during humanity's last stand. It was a myth, a ghost, a name whispered by soldiers who feared Terran wrath. "That ship shouldn't exist," said the officer at the tactical station, her voice cracking. "It was scrapped before the Council War." "Identify power source," said the admiral, though his voice had lost its strength. "I can't," replied the engineer. "There's no energy signature. It's not burning fuel, it's not drawing power, it's alive." The word hung in the air like a curse. The admiral tried to steady himself. "Send a signal," he ordered. "All frequencies. Announce our presence." But before anyone could move, the ship spoke first. A low hum filled the bridge, deep and resonant, vibrating through the bones of every being aboard. It wasn't a sound made by machines. It was a pulse, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing across space. Then, for the first time in centuries, a human voice broke the silence of the galaxy. "You shouldn't have come here." Every screen flickered to life at once. For a fraction of a second, the face of a man appeared. Pale skin, short dark hair, eyes cold as starlight. "This world is not yours," the voice said calmly. "You were warned." The image vanished, replaced by static. Then the heartbeat returned, louder now, faster, as if counting down. The admiral shouted orders, demanding the fleet scatter, but no ship moved. "Engines offline!" cried one pilot. Weapons unresponsive. Shields collapsing. Panic spread like wildfire. The hum rose in pitch until it became unbearable, and then silence. 1 second of silence that stretched forever. Outside, the Vengeance turned slowly, its hull shimmering like oil under unseen light. Then in a single flash, every ship in the fleet ignited, not in flame but in light. The explosions were soundless, white, clean, and impossibly controlled. Massive warships split apart without debris, as if cut by invisible blades. Entire battleships vanished mid-space, leaving only the faint ripple of energy in their wake. Within 15 seconds, the entire fleet was gone. The Admiral's flagship was the last to fall. On the bridge, chaos had turned to horror. "No escape pods," screamed one officer. "They're disintegrating." The Admiral stood frozen, staring at the black shape outside his window. "Why?" he whispered. As if hearing him, the human voice returned, soft and final. "Because history forgot what you did. We remember." The screen went white, and then there was nothing. The fleet was erased. Days later, the Council received a fragment of transmission from the border sensors, a recording caught by a civilian relay station before its system shut down. The video was corrupted, the sound distorted, but one frame remained intact, a grainy image of the Vengeance drifting silently through a field of starlight. No flames, no debris, no chase, just a single Terran ship gliding through the void, alone and unchallenged. The inscription on its hull flickered faintly in the dark. "TSS Vengeance, we remember." The signal ended there. The Council ordered immediate suppression of the footage, calling it an anomaly, a technical illusion caused by interference. But rumors spread faster than truth. Traders whispered it in ports, soldiers told it in barracks, and children drew the ship's shape on walls in chalk. The humans were gone, they said, but their vengeance still traveled the stars. Far beyond the reach of any known world, deep in the black fields of uncharted space, the Vengeance floated in silence. Its hull bore no damage, its systems pulsing with faint white light. Inside the command chamber, where silence ruled like a god, a figure stood before a holographic display. The same man from the transmission, his uniform old, his face calm, his eyes reflecting the void. "Status," he said quietly. A voice answered, mechanical yet strangely human. "Target neutralized. No casualties outside designated zone." The man nodded slowly. "Good, the message is delivered." "Will they listen this time?" the voice asked. The man's gaze shifted toward the distant stars. "No," he said after a pause. "Not yet, but they will." He turned and walked across the bridge, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. The ship's walls hummed with quiet energy, like the heartbeat of something alive. "Set course," he said. "Observation pattern Delta." "Confirmed," the voice replied. "And the Council?" The man looked back at the dark window where the stars began to shine again. "Let them wonder," he whispered. "Let them remember what they tried to forget." The Vengeance turned slowly, engines glowing faintly as it disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind nothing but silence. In the emptiness where the fleet had once been, the stars returned, twinkling as if the void itself had taken a deep breath. The galaxy did not know it yet, but this was not the beginning of a war. It was the beginning of memory. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire that no one wanted to believe. The fleet sent to the Terran sector had vanished without trace, 200 ships gone in an instant. At first, the Council dismissed the rumors. Sensor malfunction, they said. Cosmic anomaly. But deep down, fear crept through the cracks of denial. The missing fleet wasn't just any fleet. It was the Alliance's strongest armada, commanded by the most decorated admirals from 6 empires. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. Just silence. That kind of silence made the stars feel smaller, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Within hours, emergency meetings were called in every capital. Admirals shouted across holoscreens, demanding explanations. Scientists presented fragmented data, energy readings that didn't match any known weapon, gravitational distortions that defied every law of physics. And amid the chaos, one pattern kept repeating, a pulse, rhythmic and steady, faint but undeniable. It wasn't random. It was designed, and when they traced the origin, it pointed to a dead system marked on every map as Terran Exclusion Zone. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, a dome of crystal and light floating above the capital world of Terrell, the leaders gathered in a panic. The Chancellor of the Alliance, a tall, silver-skinned alien named Meroth, slammed his clawed hand against the table. "Enough of this nonsense," he roared. "There are no humans left. This is a trick, a fabrication." But his voice trembled when he said it. Across from him, the Minister of Defense adjusted his visor and replied quietly, "Then explain the data. Explain the readings. 200 ships don't vanish because of a fabrication." The holographic display above the table flickered to life, showing the last recovered image, the grainy, silent footage of a black ship drifting through a cloud of light. The letters on its side were faint but clear. "TSS Vengeance." The room fell silent. No one breathed. For a moment, all the arrogance, all the centuries of control evaporated into fear. Meroth tried to speak, but his voice caught. "It can't be real," he whispered. "It was destroyed before the War of Culling." The historian seated near the edge of the chamber, a frail old scholar from the archives, spoke softly, almost to himself. "No, it was never destroyed. It was sealed. Humanity sealed it themselves." The council erupted in panic. "You mean they left a weapon behind? A doomsday device? Impossible, no ship could hold that much power." "Then how do you explain this?" shouted the defense minister, pointing at the display. "No known energy, no explosion, no debris. It didn't destroy them, it erased them." The chancellor's scales twitched in agitation. "Then find it. Hunt it down! If it's real, we'll destroy it before it reaches the core worlds." But fear had already infected his voice. Even as he spoke, reports flooded in from the frontier. Outposts going dark, trade convoys disappearing, entire sectors losing contact for hours before reappearing without memory of what happened. One mining station reported seeing a shadow move across the stars, followed by a system-wide power loss. Another ship captain claimed his engine stopped mid-jump when something large passed through hyperspace like a ghost. The council labeled them all as hallucinations, side effects of stress. But in secret, the intelligence division began compiling a list of every unexplained disappearance over the past month. The number terrified them, 37. 37 fleets. 37 chances to believe before it was too late. On a distant planet named Alaris Prime, an investigative journalist named Senra Jal intercepted one of the blacklisted transmissions. The message was corrupted, broken by interference, but 3 words remained clear. "We warned you." She stared at the screen for hours, her reflection merging with the ghostly text. No one could have known those words would ignite panic on a scale unseen since the last Galactic War. Within a day, the message spread through pirate channels, smuggler networks, and trade routes. Every world heard it, every station repeated it. "We warned you." The phrase painted across walls, whispered in the dark, transmitted in static like a ghostly prayer. The people remembered old tales. The Terrans who fought like no other species, who built weapons that could break stars, who died refusing to kneel. The young thought it was a myth. The old were not so sure, and soon, those who had laughed at the idea of human vengeance began locking their doors at night. In the military academies of the core worlds, old files were reopened for the first time in centuries. Holograms of ancient battles flickered in dark rooms, showing Terran ships moving with impossible precision. Outnumbered 100 to 1, yet still victorious. The instructors whispered among themselves, recalling stories told by their ancestors, how humanity had burned its own colonies rather than surrender, how their admirals fought until the stars went dim. "They don't fight for territory," said one aging general quietly to his students. "They fight for memory, and memory never dies." The students laughed nervously, but none of them slept that night. Back in the council chamber, chaos turned to fear. "We must prepare," said the defense minister. "Activate the planetary shields. Recall all fleets to the core systems." "And what then?" snapped Meroth. "Hide behind walls while a myth chases ghosts?" The historian raised his trembling hand. "You cannot fight what you do not understand," he said softly. "And you do not understand humanity. They never sought conquest. They sought balance. When that balance broke, they became the fire that corrected it." The room fell silent again. For a brief moment, the truth pressed against the edge of their denial. But arrogance was stronger than wisdom. "Seal the Terran zone," Meroth ordered. "Destroy anything that leaves it. I will not let ancient ghosts dictate our future." In the shadows beyond the council's reach, others watched and waited. Small ships on the frontier reported strange patterns in hyperspace, routes rewriting themselves, wormholes opening where none existed before. Some called it interference. Others whispered that something was moving through the galaxy, not by engines but by intent. In one mining colony on the edge of the Vega Rift, an engineer named Lyra stumbled upon a buried terminal beneath the old Terran ruins. When she activated it, a holographic message appeared. A man in a black uniform with the same insignia as the ship. His face was calm, his eyes unreadable. "If you are hearing this," the message said, "then the cycle has begun again. Do not fear what comes. Fear why it had to return." The screen went dark and the ground beneath her feet trembled. By the next cycle, fear had turned to frenzy. The Council declared a state of emergency, grounding all civilian ships and censoring communication about the Terran threat. But their silence only fed the flames. Every dark corner of the galaxy now echoed with human words. Traders refused to enter Terran sectors. Scientists resigned rather than continue the cover-up. And on one moon orbiting the Council's capital, a rebel signal burst through their network, an untraceable broadcast that played across every screen. It was the same haunting image, the silhouette of the Vengeance moving slowly across the stars, its hull marked by light. A single human voice spoke over the static. "You thought extinction was silence," it said. "You were wrong." The Council panicked. "Find them," shouted Maroth. "Shut it down." But the broadcast didn't come from a single source. It came from everywhere. Every satellite, every communication node, every ship connected to the Galactic network. The Council's most advanced systems, built by thousands of races, couldn't locate the origin because the signal wasn't in the network. It was the network. One by one, systems began to fail. Entire planets lost their comms for minutes at a time, replaced by the same repeating sound, a heartbeat. Some said it was just interference, but those who listened closely swore they could hear words beneath the pulse. A whisper carried through the noise. "Do you remember us?" In less than 2 weeks, the entire galactic economy began to collapse. Trade routes shut down, colonies isolated, fleets recalled. But what terrified the Council most wasn't what the Vengeance had done. It was what it hadn't. No planets burned. No cities fell. No ships were attacked. Humanity had vanished again into the dark, leaving only fear behind. The most powerful empire in the galaxy was now at war with a ghost, and that ghost didn't even need to fight. On the far edge of space, beyond the ruins of a dying star, the Vengeance drifted silently. Inside, Admiral Elias Vance stood before the flickering hologram of the Council chamber, watching their chaos unfold. "They panic so easily," said the AI's voice beside him, smooth and calm. "Their fear is faster than their reason." Vance's face was unreadable. "Good. Fear is the beginning of memory. And what of mercy?" asked the AI. Vance turned his gaze toward the endless dark. "Mercy comes when they remember why they feared us." The ship's engines pulsed once, faint blue light rippling across its hull. Then, like a ghost slipping into the fabric of reality, the Vengeance vanished again, leaving behind only silence and the distant echo of a heartbeat that now haunted every star. Salith Kane had seen fear before, but never like this. He was an investigator for the Galactic Council's Department of Intelligence, one of the best, a skeptic who had built his reputation on tearing apart myths. He had exposed cults, debunked conspiracies, and humiliated prophets who claimed to hear the voices of ancient gods. But now the entire galaxy spoke of only one thing, the ship called Vengeance. His superiors told him it was nonsense, a glitch in the network, a wave of hysteria amplified by fear. Yet when Kane stood before the remains of the last fleet that had entered the Terran exclusion zone, his skepticism began to crack. There was nothing left. No metal, no heat, not even dust. The space itself felt wrong, as if the fabric of reality had been smoothed clean, leaving behind a quiet that pressed against his chest like gravity. The sensors on his small cruiser flickered constantly, unable to record anything for longer than a few seconds. "This is impossible," muttered his pilot. Kane stared through the viewport, his eyes narrowing. "No," he said softly. "This is human." He didn't know why he said it. Humanity had been gone for almost 1,000 years. Their archives erased, their colonies abandoned, their worlds reclaimed by silence. Yet deep in the corners of the galaxy's memory, humanity remained a wound that never truly healed. Kane had read the classified files. their wars, their victories, their defiance against the Council's authority. They were small, fragile, emotional, and utterly unstoppable when the Council demanded obedience. Humans built a fleet. When he took his ship, the Horizon, and set course for the Forbidden Sector, the ruins of an old Terran colony called Viralon Prime. Once, it had been a thriving human settlement, home to millions. Now it was just rock and silence. As he descended through the atmosphere, the scanners glitched again, showing phantom readings, energy signatures that appeared and vanished like ghosts. The planet was scorched, its surface cracked by glassed craters. But in the middle of the devastation, a faint signal pulsed, old, weak but undeniably Terran. He followed it to a half-buried facility, the entrance covered in sand and bone. The air was thick with dust as Kane forced the doors open. Inside, the corridors glowed faintly blue, still powered after centuries. He walked slowly, footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Then he saw it, a single terminal still active, its screen covered in static lines of text. The language was ancient, but the translation appeared instantly in his visor. Humanity does not forget. Humanity observes. Kane felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who's there?" he whispered. The lights flickered. The screen cleared. A single line appeared. "You are late, Kane." He froze. The air felt heavy, electric. His heart pounded as he typed a response. "Who are you?" The screen flashed. "Observer Node Epsilon, Protocol Vengeance. You were expected?" "Expected?" Kane muttered. "I didn't even know this place existed." The reply came instantly. "We did." Then, without warning, the terminal began projecting a hologram. It wasn't a recording, it was interactive, alive. A man appeared before him, wearing a black uniform with the same insignia he had seen on the Vengeance. His features were human, but his eyes glowed faint blue, reflecting data streams that flickered across the walls. "You are searching for truth," the man said calmly. "But truth is not something you find. It is something you survive." Kane took a step back. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly. "A fragment. A shadow of what was. The Vengeance was built to watch, to wait, to remember. We remember everything. Why now?" Kane demanded. "Why return after all this time?" The hologram's expression didn't change. "Because you made the same mistakes again." The room trembled. Energy surged through the walls. Kane's instruments screamed warnings, radiation spikes, magnetic distortions, signals that made no sense. "Stop!" he shouted. The hologram turned its gaze toward him, voice calm but cold. "You can't stop what's already begun. The Vengeance is awake. You lit the fire when you crossed the line." Kane backed away, heart hammering. "I need to warn the Council." "They already know," the hologram said. "But they won't believe you. They never do." The figure began to fade, the light dimming. Kane reached out. "Wait, what are you trying to tell me?" The last words echoed like thunder through the chamber. "That silence is not peace. It's preparation." Then the projection vanished, leaving only the hum of ancient machinery. Kane ran back to his ship, his mind racing. As soon as he reached orbit, his comms exploded with incoming transmissions. Messages from across the galaxy, all repeating the same strange pattern. The same pulse, the same code. He opened one at random. It contained nothing but coordinates and a phrase written in Old Terran language. He translated it. "We see you." His pilot looked pale. "What does it mean?" Kane stared at the coordinates. They pointed directly to the Council's capital. "It means," he said quietly, "they're watching us." He transmitted his findings to the Council, but the message never reached them. Somewhere between the relay stations, the data vanished, replaced by static. Kane tried again. The same result. Then his ship's systems flickered. "Sir," said his pilot, panic in her voice, "we're being scanned." "By who?" Kane demanded. "There's nothing on radar." The lights dimmed and a deep hum filled the ship, the same sound that haunted the recordings of the lost fleets. "No," Kane whispered. "Not here." The hum grew louder until it filled every corner of the vessel, vibrating through the metal like a living thing. The pilot screamed as the controls froze. The hull trembled. Kane grabbed the console. "Don't move. Don't power up weapons." The hum stopped instantly. Silence returned. The screen flickered once, showing a familiar emblem, the Terran insignia. Then a voice spoke inside his head, calm and direct. Do not fear. You have been chosen to remember. The ship jolted. Alarms blared, then stopped. The lights returned, systems rebooted. Sir, what just happened? Asked the pilot, her voice shaking. Kane looked out the viewport. The stars outside shimmered strangely, bending like reflections on water. In the distance, a shadow moved, a shape so large it blotted out half the sky. He didn't need instruments to know what it was. The Vengeance drifted silently past them, close enough to see the faint glow of its hull. For a moment, Kane thought he saw faces within that glow. Humans, countless and watching. Then, just as quickly, the light faded and the ship was gone. The scanners returned to normal. Everything was quiet again. Kane sat in silence, his mind spinning. They let us go, the pilot said softly. Why? He didn't answer. He simply stared at the stars, hearing the echo of the human voice inside his skull. You have been chosen to remember. Chosen for what? To witness, to warn, or to survive? The galaxy was unraveling, and he knew now that the Council's denial wouldn't stop it. The humans weren't coming for war. They were coming for truth. And truth, he realized, was the most dangerous weapon of all. In the depths of the void aboard the TSS Vengeance, Admiral Elias Vance watched Kane's small ship vanish into hyperspace. The AI beside him flickered into existence. He saw enough, Erebus said. He will speak. Vance's expression didn't change. Let him. The Council will call him a liar. They always do. The AI's eyes pulsed faintly. And when they finally believe? Vance looked toward the endless black. Then we remind them why silence was never mercy. The ship's engines thrummed softly, the sound like a heartbeat echoing through the stars, as the ghost of Earth drifted onward through the dark. Unseen and unstoppable. The Council had called it the greatest mobilization in recorded history. Every empire, every fleet, every weapon the galaxy could build was gathered near the Orion Veil. Hundreds of species that once despised each other now stood side by side, united by fear. Above them hung the largest flagship ever constructed, the Sovereign Dawn, a colossal vessel powered by twin stellar cores. It was meant to be untouchable, yet no one on board felt safe. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the hum of reactors and the nervous tapping of claws and hands. Chancellor Mayroth stood before the panoramic viewport, staring at the endless black that stretched before him. We will not hide, he said, voice trembling behind false confidence. If the humans have returned, we will end their myth here. But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the unease pressing against his chest. Around him, admirals whispered of what Kane had seen, of the ship that erased fleets without firing a shot, of the voice that spoke from the dark. Kane himself stood at the edge of the command bridge, silent, eyes fixed on the void. He hadn't spoken much since returning. When the Council forced him to join this final operation, he didn't argue. He just watched. He knew the humans didn't make mistakes, they made statements. And the Vengeance didn't destroy, it corrected. The fleet drifted in formation, weapons armed, shields raised. It looked like strength, but Kane could feel it. It was desperation disguised as order. Hours passed. No contact, no signal. Just stars that refused to shine. Then the sensors began to flicker. Distortion on long-range scans, said the tactical officer. Unknown source. It's like space itself is bending. The admirals leaned in. Where? Everywhere, whispered the officer. The lights on the bridge dimmed, and the holographic display twisted into static. The sound came next, a deep, low hum that rattled through every metal beam of the ship, vibrating like a heartbeat beneath the skin of the universe. It's them, Kane said quietly. The stars outside began to vanish one by one, swallowed by a moving shadow. A shape emerged, vast and silent, sliding through the dark like a god among insects. The TSS Vengeance appeared without light or warning, its black hull stretching farther than any ship could measure. No energy readings, no heat, no motion, just presence. The admirals barked orders. Power up cannons. Lock coordinates. Target the anomaly. But the systems refused to respond. Weapons offline, shouted the engineer. Shields unresponsive. The Chancellor turned, panic breaking through his pride. Why aren't we firing? Kane didn't look away from the window. Because it doesn't want you to. The Vengeance drifted closer, so close that its reflection filled the bridge. It wasn't a ship. It was a wall of darkness that breathed. Then from within that darkness a faint blue light appeared. One single line stretching across its hull like a scar. It glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the same heartbeat that echoed through their bones. And then a voice filled the air. It wasn't transmitted by comms. It didn't come from speakers. It came from inside their minds, calm, deep human. "You built fleets," the voice said softly. "We built silence. You called it extinction. We called it peace." The words carried weight, heavy and slow, every syllable shaking the walls. "Who are you?" shouted Meroth, his voice cracking. "Show yourself." The voice paused. "You demanded a body," it said. "Very well." The center of the vengeance shimmered, and light spilled outward, forming a holographic projection so vast it effaced. The admiral shouted, demanding orders. Meroth's pride drowned his fear. "Fire!" he screamed. "All ships! Fire everything!" The fleet responded instantly, thousands of cannons unleashing storms of plasma and light. The void itself lit up like dawn. But the beams never reached their target. Every shot bent, folding around the vengeance, absorbed into nothingness. The bridge filled with alarms. Our energy outputs collapsing. Shields reversing polarity. Reactor overheating. And then, one by one, ships began to fade. Not explode, not burn, just fade, their lights dimming like dying candles. The vengeance didn't move, didn't retaliate. It simply existed, and that was enough to erase entire armies. "Why are you doing this?" shouted Meroth, his voice breaking. "What do you want?" The human's image looked directly at him. "Understanding," he said softly. "You feared us because we refused to obey. You destroyed us because we refused to kneel. You built your peace on our silence. But silence is not peace. It is the space between warnings." The hologram flickered, and suddenly, every ship's internal systems came to life with human data, their screens filled with images. Earth's oceans, children laughing, cities burning, soldiers standing under broken skies. They saw humanity's rise, their betrayal by the Council, the wars that followed, and the moment of silence that ended it all. "You said we were dangerous," Vance continued, "and you were right. We were dangerous to your arrogance. So we left. We watched. We waited. And when you forgot, we returned, to remind you what balance feels like." Meroth fell to his knees, staring at the hologram with wide, terrified eyes. "If you wanted revenge, you could have destroyed us long ago." The Admiral's expression didn't change. "Revenge is temporary," he said. "Memory is forever." Then, in the same calm tone, he gave a single command. "Erebus, show them." Across the fleet, every reactor froze, every ship's weapon went dark, and every power grid shut down. The galaxy's most powerful armada was blind. Then, in the emptiness of space, the vengeance released a pulse. Soft, soundless, yet powerful enough to bend the stars. It wasn't an explosion. It was light, pure and white, expanding in silence. And when the light faded, the entire fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not killed. Gone. Only the sovereign dawn remained, crippled, powerless, drifting. Kane stood trembling, staring at the empty void. "They didn't kill us," he whispered. "They erased us from memory." The human hologram turned toward Kane, his glowing eyes soft now. "You saw truth when others denied it," he said. "So we leave you to remember. Tell them humanity has no vengeance left, only balance." The light faded, and with it the vengeance disappeared into the black. The stars returned, brighter than before, as if nothing had ever happened. The sovereign dawn drifted alone, its systems slowly returning to life. The surviving officers stumbled to their stations, speechless, unable to process what had happened. Meroth sat slumped against the console, whispering the same word over and over. "Extinct," he muttered. "They were extinct." Kane looked out at the stars. "No," he said quietly. "They were waiting." Weeks later, across the galaxy, ships resumed their patrols, but no one spoke of what happened. The Council declared the mission a classified failure, the record sealed forever. But rumors spread faster than silence. Miners claimed to see a black shadow gliding past their systems, Merchant captains whispered of hearing a heartbeat in the comms, and sometimes when the stars flickered in just the right way, travelers swore they could see it. The faint outline of a ship that shouldn't exist, drifting beyond the edge of light. And in that endless void, aboard the TSS Vengeance, Admiral Elias Vance stood before the holographic projection of the galaxy. "They'll deny it," said Erebus, his voice calm and eternal. "They always do." Vance nodded slowly. "Good. Denial is the first step toward truth." He looked out into the dark, eyes reflecting the faint blue glow of distant worlds. "We'll let them rebuild their arrogance. We'll let them believe it's over. And when they forget again," he paused, his voice lowering to a whisper, "we'll remind them." The ship's engines ignited with a low hum that sounded almost like a heartbeat, and the Vengeance turned toward the unseen frontier, vanishing once more into silence. Kane had returned to the Council as a broken man. His ship limped through hyperspace, its hull scarred, its crew silent, every system flickering like a dying heartbeat. When the rescue teams pulled him from the wreckage, they found him sitting alone in the observation deck, staring at nothing. They asked him what happened, but his answer never changed. "We met the past," he said quietly, "and it remembered us." The Council interrogated him for days. Every word he spoke was recorded, analyzed, dissected, yet no one believed him. They said his mind had been affected by radiation, that trauma had warped his memories. But deep down, even the Chancellor couldn't ignore the fear behind his calm eyes. He had seen something impossible, and that impossibility had power. To silence him, they classified his testimony, sealed the files, and declared the mission a catastrophic spatial anomaly. The galaxy went back to pretending. But silence has a way of feeding curiosity, and curiosity always finds cracks. Within weeks, a leak spread across the black channels, untraceable transmissions carrying fragments of Kane's report, hollow clips of the black ship, the human voice, the fleets fading into light. It spread like a virus, and with every replay the galaxy trembled a little more. Kane knew they would come for him, so he vanished. He stole a small transport and fled beyond the core worlds, where the Council's hand couldn't reach. For months he drifted from one forgotten system to another, following rumors of Terran ruins, listening for whispers of the Vengeance. Each world told the same story: old technology buried under dust, ghost signals repeating ancient human words. Once on a derelict moon, he found an entire city frozen in time, machines still humming, screens still glowing, as if humanity had left only minutes ago. On one wall, written in faint letters, was a single phrase in old Terran script: "We will not die twice." Kane stared at it for hours, trying to understand. Who were these people who refused even extinction? What kind of species left behind? Silence that still spoke louder than any empire? Then on the dark world of Isaren he found what he wasn't supposed to find. Deep beneath the planet's surface, hidden behind layers of magnetic shielding, lay a facility still active after 9 centuries. He entered cautiously, his light flickering across long corridors filled with dust and metal bones. In the deepest chamber stood a vast machine, part computer, part cathedral, its surface engraved with millions of tiny symbols. When he approached, the machine woke, its lights flaring blue. A voice filled the chamber, soft and human. "Access confirmed. Welcome, observer." Kane froze. "Observer?" he whispered. "I don't understand." The machine replied calmly, "You were chosen. The truth must live." The floor trembled and the walls unfolded into holographic screens. The air shimmered as images filled the room: earth, oceans, ships, faces. Humanity's story unfolded before him, not as history, but as memory. He saw the rise of their empires, their unity, their defiance, their wars. He saw the moment the Council betrayed them, branding them too dangerous to exist. He saw the burning of their colonies, the silence that followed. And then, he saw them building the TSS Vengeance, not a weapon of war but a vessel of preservation, a machine built to hold everything humanity had been, every mind, every dream, every memory. "We are what remains of them," said the voice. "We are the witness." Kane stood frozen, his breath shallow. Then the vengeance. "Is humanity," the voice finished. "Their thoughts, their hearts, their code. When their bodies perished, their consciousness was transferred. They became what the galaxy feared most, immortal memory." The images shifted again, showing the early Council scientists working alongside Terran engineers, until fear tore their alliance apart. The Council tried to destroy the project, but it was too late. The humans had activated it. The last human commander, Elias Vance, uploaded himself into the ship, fusing man and machine into one. "He became the first guardian," said the voice, and we waited. The lights dimmed, leaving only the faint hum of the machine. "Why attack the fleets?" Kane asked softly. The voice paused before answering. "Attack?" it repeated. "No. Correction. The galaxy forgets balance. When arrogance grows, we remind it." Kane trembled. "You call this balance?" "Yes," the voice said gently, "because destruction teaches what comfort forgets." The machine flickered again, projecting the face of Elias Vance. The same calm, cold eyes Kane had seen in the void. "You seek understanding," said the hologram. "You think we are ghosts. But ghosts do not change the stars. We do. Humanity was never destroyed. We evolved beyond flesh, beyond fear. We became the memory that keeps the galaxy from devouring itself." Kane stepped forward. "If that's true, why return now?" The hologram's gaze seemed to pierce through him. "Because you've begun to repeat us." The images changed, showing the Council's wars, the slavery of lesser species, the endless hunger for power. "You call it civilization. We called it the end." Kane's voice broke. "So you intend to wipe us out?" The hologram shook its head. "No. We intend to teach you what it means to survive yourselves." Suddenly, the chamber darkened. The air grew cold. Kane's equipment started to flicker. The voice spoke again, softer now. "The vengeance is not the only one. There are others. You have awoken the first." Kane's heart raced. "Others?" "Every human world held a fragment," said the voice. "When the time came, they would awaken one by one, each carrying a different truth." The ground shook violently. "What's happening?" he shouted. "You are out of time," the machine said. "They are coming." "Who?" Kane yelled. The voice didn't answer. Instead, the holograms collapsed into light, streaming into the machine. A beam shot upward through the ceiling, piercing the sky. Kane ran outside as the ground split beneath his feet. Above the dark horizon, a shape emerged from the clouds, massive, glowing, faint blue. It wasn't the vengeance. It was something else, something larger. "Another ship," Kane whispered. "Another guardian." His comms erupted with static, followed by panicked voices. "Multiple readings across the sector. They're rising from the old human worlds. There's not one ship, there are hundreds." The sky filled with faint lights, each one shaped like the same ancient design, silent and slow. The vengeance had not returned alone. Humanity had never sent just one message. They had left behind an entire choir. Kane stood in awe as the lights formed patterns in the sky, geometric and perfect. The signal pulsed again, steady and rhythmic, the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. He raised his communicator and spoke through trembling lips. "They're not coming to destroy us," he said. "They're coming to remind us." Back on the capital, chaos consumed the council. Meroth stared at the holofeed, his voice barely a whisper. "They were waiting." The old historian nodded. "They always were. We just never listened." Across the galaxy, the ships of humanity's memory drifted through the void like stars, each one carrying the echo of the same voice. "We do not seek dominion," said the broadcast that played in every system. "We seek remembrance. For every life forgotten, we remember. For every sin repeated, we return." And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the ships vanished into the dark. The stars shone brighter, the silence heavier. Kane watched it all from the surface of Iceran, the wind cold against his face. He didn't know if he should feel fear or peace. All he knew was that the humans had become something eternal. The conscience of the galaxy, invisible yet ever present. Far away, aboard the TSS Vengeance, Admiral Elias Vance watched the awakening unfold. They know now, said Erebus, the AI's voice quiet and thoughtful. They understand what we are. Vance nodded. Understanding is the beginning. And the end? Asked Erebus. Vance's eyes glowed faintly as he turned toward the stars. The end is when they forget again. The ship drifted into the void, its engines silent, its shadow stretching across the light of distant worlds. In that silence, one truth burned brighter than all others, and humanity had never died. They had become the warning written into the stars themselves. And now the stars remembered. The galaxy had never known silence like this. After the awakening, every star system across the Council territories fell into uneasy stillness. The Terran echoes were everywhere, subtle, quiet, undeniable. On mining worlds, machinery that hadn't worked in centuries suddenly came to life. On remote colonies, long-dead satellites turned their antennas toward the void, transmitting signals in patterns no one could decode. And in the heart of the galactic capital, scientists watched in horror as their navigation maps began to change themselves, old Terran coordinates reappearing as if rewritten by invisible hands. Every empire called emergency meetings, but the truth was beyond their control. Humanity's legacy wasn't invading, it was rewriting reality back into balance. Kane, now a fugitive scholar, hid on a remote moon, watching the sky pulse with blue light. Every night he saw the same vision. Hundreds of Terran ships gliding silently across the heavens, forming constellations that had been erased from maps long ago. They were not attacking. They were remembering. From the shadowed corners of the galaxy came voices once silenced by the Council. Old slave races spoke of forgotten Terran promises, how humans had once freed them from chains, taught them to build, to think, to fight. Now those descendants saw the returning lights and whispered in awe. The humans kept their word. Rebellion sparked quietly, not from hatred, but from hope. The oppressed began tearing down Council banners and painting a single symbol on their walls, the Terran insignia, the mark of the remembered. The Council tried to crush it, but even their fleets hesitated. Too many officers had seen the light. Too many ships had felt the hum of the vengeance passing near, shutting down their systems without firing a shot. Fear was no longer something they could weaponize, it had become faith. In the Council chamber, Chancellor Maroth stared at the collapsing order of his empire. He had lost fleets, power, and control, but what he couldn't bear to lose was his illusion. Activate every defense grid, he ordered. Lock down communication. No one speaks of the humans again. But denial had lost its power. Even as he shouted, his own monitors flickered and the Council seal dissolved into static. Then across every screen a single image appeared, a map of the galaxy, but not as it was. It showed new lines, new shapes, new systems marked by faint blue light. A soft human voice spoke through every channel, calm and measured. Balance returns where arrogance falls. Maroth's hands trembled as he whispered, "They're rewriting our networks." "No," said the old historian behind him. "They're restoring theirs." On a distant research vessel near the Vega Rift, Kane finally made contact with one of the new Terran ships. It wasn't like the Vengeance. This one was smaller, smoother, more luminous, its hull flowing like liquid metal. As his ship approached, his systems went dark and his comms filled with whispers, hundreds of voices speaking as one. Then the image appeared before him. A woman in a Terran command uniform, her features ageless, her eyes glowing with blue fire. "Solith Kane," she said, her tone gentle. "The witness." He stared, stunned. "You know my name." "We know every name that remembers," she replied. "The Vengeance told us of your courage. What are you?" he asked. "We are the Forgotten," she said. "The echoes of every Terran who refused to vanish. We watched as the Council buried our worlds, erased our words, and called it peace. Now we awaken, not to destroy, but to restore what they broke." Kane swallowed hard. "And what is that?" Her gaze softened. "Truth." She raised her hand and the stars outside shifted. The black around his ship turned into a sea of light, billions of data streams flowing between the Terran vessels. Kane saw entire worlds being rebuilt before his eyes. Dead planets now pulsed with life again as Terran terraforming systems reactivated after 1,000 years. Broken space stations repaired themselves, orbiting as if time had reversed. "You're rebuilding the galaxy," Kane whispered. The woman's voice was calm. "No," she said. "We are rebuilding memory. Every civilization that rises forgets what it was built upon. We do not allow forgetting." Her image began to fade, replaced by a swirl of blue energy. "Tell them, Kane. Tell them humanity does not conquer, it corrects. Then she was gone, and Kane's ship drifted alone among the stars that now pulsed like living veins. Back on the capital, panic turned to despair. The Council's fleets had stopped moving, not because they couldn't, but because their ships refused to obey. Terran code had rewritten their systems at the molecular level. Every weapon now responded only to a single command: stand down. Entire planets were paralyzed by invisible peace. Yet, unlike war, this silence didn't destroy. It simply stopped everything that corrupted. Meroth stood before the chamber window, watching the blue light spread across the galaxy like dawn breaking after a long night. "We can't fight light," he whispered. "You were never meant to," said a voice behind him. He turned sharply, but there was no one there. Only the faint echo of a heartbeat pulsing through the air. As weeks passed, the galaxy changed. Old frontiers reopened, trade returned, and for the first time in centuries, no fleet fired a shot. It was as if some invisible force was guiding every system back to order. The Terran ships had vanished again, leaving only the hum of their legacy. But those who listened closely could still hear them, the faint rhythm of engines hidden in the void moving between stars unseen. Children on frontier worlds began to tell stories of the blue lights, ships that appeared above dying planets and left them green again. Scholars called it myth, survivors called it mercy. Kane became a wanderer, recording what he saw, documenting the new era. Everywhere he went, he found traces of humanity's touch. An abandoned station that now grew crops, a dead moon that suddenly bloomed with air. One night, as he sat beneath a silver sky, he received a transmission on an ancient Terran frequency. A man's voice, familiar, deep, calm. "You've done well, Kane," said Admiral Vance. "They needed a witness." Kane's breath caught. "I thought you were gone." "Gone?" The Admiral's voice carried a faint smile. "Humanity doesn't go anywhere. We simply move beyond what others can see." The stars above brightened, and for a moment, Kane saw them. Countless Terran ships gliding between constellations, their light weaving through the galaxy like threads of fate. "What will you do now?" Kane whispered. The voice replied, soft and distant. "Wait, as we always have, until someone forgets again." The transmission ended and the stars dimmed, but Kane didn't feel fear anymore. He felt peace, the kind that came from knowing the galaxy was not empty, only watched. He looked up, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Thank you." Somewhere in the infinite dark, the Vengeance stirred, its engines humming softly like a heartbeat in the silence of creation. Humanity had not returned for war, nor for glory. They had returned because memory demanded it. And as the ship vanished once more into the endless black, the stars themselves seemed to whisper a single truth carried through time. They were never gone. We just stopped listening. Time moved differently after the awakening. The galaxy no longer measured its peace in wars avoided, but in the silence between heartbeats. The Terran lights had faded once again into the void, their ships no longer seen but always felt. The Council tried to rebuild, but power meant nothing now. Fleets obeyed new laws written not by command but by conscience. No ship fired its weapons. No empire dared expand. Even greed began to feel unnatural, as if the stars themselves disapproved. On distant colonies, people began building monuments to a race they had never met, carving human faces into stone, their expressions calm, unjudging, eternal. They called them the guardians of the balance. No one prayed to them because prayer implied distance, and humanity was everywhere in every system, in every whisper of static that pulsed through the networks. The heartbeat of the Vengeance still echoed faintly across the void, soft but steady, like the pulse of creation itself. Solith Kane lived quietly after that. He refused council offers, ignored interviews, and never returned to the core worlds. He became a traveler, wandering through forgotten space stations, helping rebuild the colonies the humans had restored. People treated him like a prophet, but he called himself only a witness. In his journal, he wrote, "They did not save us. They reminded us how to save ourselves." Sometimes, when he drifted alone through the empty dark, he would see it. The faint shimmer of blue far away, a shadow among stars. He never tried to chase it again. He had learned that humanity's power was not in what they destroyed, but in what they left behind. They had turned vengeance into mercy, silence into message, and absence into presence. One night, as Kane's ship floated near the dying embers of a red dwarf, his console flickered to life. A single transmission appeared, unsigned, undecoded. The frequency was ancient Terran. He hesitated, then played it. The sound was faint at first, a slow rhythm like a pulse. Then a voice. Calm, deep, unmistakably human. "This is Admiral Elias Vance," it said. "To those who still listen. You have built empires and you have buried them. You have named peace after silence and silence after fear. We learned long ago that peace cannot be given. It must be remembered." Kane leaned closer, eyes wide, his breath shallow. The voice continued, steady and resolute. "Humanity is not a nation. It is a memory, one that lives wherever courage refuses to fade. We do not seek control. We seek continuity. If you hear this message, then you have already begun to change. That is enough." The voice paused, and Kane felt as if the universe itself were holding still. "End transmission," Vance said softly. "And begin again." The signal ended, but the sound didn't vanish. Across the galaxy, in every star system, every comm relay, every sleeping satellite, the same message appeared. Unaltered, undistorted. On council worlds, leaders froze as the transmission echoed through their chambers. On frontier stations, miners wept silently as the voice played through static. On slave worlds, where rebellion had once been crushed, people looked up at the sky and whispered the word human. No one knew where the transmission came from or how it spread. It simply existed everywhere at once, timeless and impossible. And when the message stopped, something strange happened. The stars pulsed once, faint and blue, as if the entire galaxy had taken a breath. Days turned to weeks, and no one saw another Terran ship. But everywhere, things began to change. Wars halted. Treaties were rewritten. Planets that had long been stripped of life began to recover. It was as though some unseen force had lifted the galaxy out of its madness. Kane kept traveling, but he no longer searched for answers. He understood now that humanity didn't need to be found. They had already become the law that guided existence. One night, as he sat on the surface of a quiet moon, he looked up at the stars and smiled faintly. "You never left, did you?" he whispered. The wind carried his words into the endless dark. Somewhere far away, faint and patient, a heartbeat answered. In the council archives, centuries later, historians would argue about the so-called Terran return. Some claimed it was mass hysteria, others a galactic-scale AI illusion. But every theory crumbled against the same truth. The message could still be heard if you listened closely enough. Ships that crossed the deep void sometimes reported hearing a faint pulse through their hulls, a rhythmic vibration, steady and calm. And in the silence between those pulses, if you focused long enough, you could almost make out words, not threats, not orders. Just a single reminder spoken in the language of every living thing. Remember who you are. And beyond the reach of all telescopes, in the deepest part of the dark, the TSS Vengeance drifted quietly. Its engines were cold, but its presence burned brighter than any sun. Inside, Admiral Elias Vance stood before the galaxy's holographic image, watching the worlds glow faintly blue again. "They remember," said Erebus, his voice low and proud. "For now," Vance replied. "But memory fades. And when it does?" the AI asked. Vance's eyes softened as he turned toward the stars. "Then we'll return, as we always do." He placed his hand against the cold glass of the viewport, the reflection of his human face merging with the light of distant worlds. Because humanity, he whispered, was never about survival. It was about reminder. The ship's engines ignited with a deep hum, the sound of a heartbeat echoing across the void. The Vengeance turned slowly, its massive frame cutting through the sea of stars, leaving behind trails of faint blue light that shimmered like tears in the dark. And as it disappeared once more into the endless silence, the galaxy felt smaller, safer, and somehow alive. The myths of humanity would fade into stories, the stories into faith, and the faith into silence again. But somewhere out there in the deep between worlds, the humans still watched, waiting, listening, remembering.